seems to be. So, yeah, it's nothing new. You told before. My name is Riccardo Tempesta, and I'm CTO at MageSpecialist. And today, I want to talk with you about security. Yeah, of course, I'm talking about Magento security. Now, in the case you're wearing it in the wrong place. But I won't say from the beginning, I will not say anything about encryption, so what is the best algorithm, or how complex your password should be, even because I hope you're already using a password that is something more complex than 1, 2, 3, 4, I hope. Do you have such password? What is your email? No, I'm joking. But instead, I want to start with one question. This question is very simple. Oh, yeah. It's very simple, but it may be very complex to answer, actually. Because do you know what is the difference between real-life security and IT security? Yeah, I know. Most of you would just answer, well, real-life security is real. Yeah, impressive answer, actually. But, yeah, it seems like that IT security is something virtual. So for real-life security, for example, I mean, if someone breaks in your house, oh, it's dangerous, it's creepy, it's something you do not want. So, and if someone, yeah, you know, hack my PC, yeah, okay, it's a problem, but I just have probably the most precious stuff I have in my PC is my Steam account. And yeah, okay, I also have that secret folder, but I don't want to talk about that today. But, you know, it seems like less dangerous. But people, it is not like this, absolutely. Because today, we live in what I could call a cyborg society. I explain to you why. You know, a cyborg is an organism composed by a mechanical part and one biological part. And you know, we are the biological part, of course, because we are humans, and the mechanical parts are machines, so computers. And we are interconnected. Sometimes we rely on machine even for life support. So actually, we cannot say anymore that IT security is something external to real life. Because, you know, an IT problem sometimes has direct impacts on our social life, on our economy. So, for example, if I steal your PayPal account and I want to know what is your PayPal account, no, you're not saying, anyway. If I steal your PayPal account, I can steal your money. If I have access to your Facebook, I can know where you are, I can see your picture, and so on. This is going to be actually more scary because if someone breaks in your house, for example, you know it immediately. But the problem with IT is that you may have a man in the machine, the so-called man in the machine, for 2 months, and you do not know. This is going to be really, really scary. Because sometimes, you know, most of the people think to an hack attempt, for example, as a defacement. So something that you can see immediately, something that changes in your website, for example. But we know that sometimes the attacks we have are hidden. So for example, we may have a JavaScript in our checkout procedure, hijacking some kind of information. So it's going to be very tricky. But despite this, I know that very few people are really concerned about security. And yes, if you're asking me, that is the proper way to say what in Italian. So actually, it's more WTF, but you don't speak Italian, so it's fine. Are really not concerned about security. And every time I ask them why, it seems like they are facing like with a kind of optimism. Because, you know, it's very strange, because the last time I just remember, I asked it to my customer, it was a very small one. I asked him, why you didn't install the last Magento patch? And it was shoplift. I don't know if you remember. He told me, oh, no, I'm small. I have a small business. No one will care me. It seems like, you know, the ugly duckling story. No one will like me because I'm poor and ugly. It's very strange, because it doesn't matter if you have a big business, a small business, if you're white, black, or yellow, purple, or whatever. If you have a security issue, someone, sooner or later, will use it. That's it. Even because, guys, I want you to focus on what happened on 1984 when we forgot about machine security. No one of you remember? Really? Terminator? Of course, I'm joking, because I don't expect Magento to kill your model traveling back in time, but, well, not Magento 2 at least, probably Magento 3, I don't know. But, okay, but you know, security is a serious topic, so let's go back to reality. And I want to face, you know, IT security can be faced from different aspects. For example, we can talk about operating system security, we can talk about infrastructure, we can even talk about hacking people, so social engineering. But today, since I hope most of you are developers, raise your hand if you're a developer. Okay, a lot of people. So I want to keep at application level, because despite sci-fi movies, I think that humans are the most, and actually the only, hackable systems. In a way that we are the only one introducing bugs in our software. And this is absolutely true, because we can have very secure software, but we can introduce bugs without knowing security bugs. And I want to say this because a lot of people tell me, oh, but I use Magento, and Magento is one of the most secure e-commerce platforms in the world. And yeah, that's true. But first of all, no software is bug-free. And second, if we develop a Magento, we are injecting code inside Magento. So we are modifying its behavior. So we can have a very strong platform, and we could be the very first reason for a security issue. So sometimes it just depends on us. So this is why I found out 3 main rules of the IT Security Fight Club. And I want to start with the first one, yes, of course, because that's the number 1, probably, because I think it's very important, because we are talking about Magento. The very first rule is to report any security issue you may find in Magento or in any module. Because we know, yeah, that Magento security is a Magento team responsibility, but if Magento is open source, I think that contributing is our responsibility. So if we find something in an open source software, we should be the first one notifying or fixing that problem. This is very important, because we are talking about Magento, and you know that open source means contributing. And even because, yeah, you know, the Magento people are crazy people, everyone knows this. I'm sorry, guys. Because they pay you if you find a security bug. So they allow you to use the most powerful e-commerce software in the world, and they will pay you if you fix a bug on the software you use. So this is just crazy. But you can get money on this. There is a bug bounty program on Bugcrowd, and they pay you up to $10,000 if you find a bug. Of course, I think that for $10,000, it must be a very huge bug. But you can get money with my slides, so you will learn something to get money from Magento. The second one is a very important aspect, is to avoid as much as possible introducing new security issues. So don't be you the first one adding problems to your Magento. And the only way to know how to do that is to know your enemy. So we have to understand that every single security bug is nothing more than one unexpected behavior of your code. And when you write your code, you can write your code in a very good way, but maybe you're using a PHP method, a PHP function with side effects you do not know. This is probably the first of the problems you may have while programming with PHP, and you should avoid introducing new unexpected behavior. So I will start with this advisory, because the next slide may contain PHP code that may hurt you on sensitivity. So if you have problems, please. So let's look at the first example. It's one of my favorite example. We have this. This is very simple. So I expect you to tell me what's wrong here. This is a block class in Magento somewhere in your code, and we are getting an outside parameter. This parameter is search. And we have a template file saying search result for, and what we get from the outside. I want to see people raising their hand, telling me what's wrong here. So raise your hand if you know what is the problem. Exactly. This is one of the most stupid bugs, but one of the most powerful security issues you may introduce. Because if someone injects, for example, a script like this, you can get information, for example, on the session. You can even modify the document. You can do whatever. And if you send an email, for example, with this, yeah, I was pointing to the monitor, yeah. With this malicious URL example, I didn't know why it was not working. I was wondering why. If you create an URL like this and you send to someone email, you can even steal the session, for example. So this is going to be very dangerous. And of course, as you told before, the simple option you have to fix this is to use one escape. So just escape your input. This is the first lesson. Never trust your input. So now we are going to another example, a little bit more complex, but we are still looking at simple examples. This was a real extension I found. I will not say you what is the name of this extension, of course, but this is real. It was an extension handling, I don't remember exactly, blog articles or something like that. And I found inside this model, it was a resource model, running this query. So it was just selecting something from the database with a certain category ID. Quite easy. What is the problem here? You? Yeah. Yes, exactly. Because if you try to inject something like the first query, of course you get access to admin user table. This is just an example. But the most dangerous stuff comes from some command that few people know. For example, is load data, load file, or functions that MySQL uses to write files, for example. So potentially, I have access to the whole file system. I know most of you just disable, for example, load file MySQL function, but most do not. So of course, this is just a stupid example, but my point is, I'm quite sure you will not introduce this kind of bug in your code, but pay attention when using third-party modules. Because every time you use something from the outside, you should be checking what is inside. Because this is what I found, and this is a real extension. Yeah, and of course, yeah, the solution is quite simple. So we should escape it using this method or this other way. But the best option is the third one: stop using direct queries and start studying Magento 2 repositories. And example number 3. This is going to be a little more complex. So we have a method. This is another piece of code I found in extensions. That we have a method getting a file content. So we just pass a path, and we got a file content. So most of you would just say, OK, we have a potential path traversal problem. Because if I, for example, inject in path something like .. I could, for example, move outside the Magento file system or read anything. But here we have a check. So what's wrong with this code? Can you see this? Because few people know this. This is going to be the very first one, hard example. This is just a nice try. This guy was smart, but we have one unexpected behavior of PHP that is converting backslashes into slashes, even in Linux. So the first example is completely ineffective. If we pass a backslash, we can get anything we want from the file system. And most of the people would just look at that code and say, OK, they did a security check. But doing a filter is not always the best option you have. For example, in my opinion, before filtering the input, you should normalize the input. If you do not normalize, you may have thousands of scenarios you will not cover. So for example, before checking that, you should be using something like getRealPath that is translating the .. notation with the real one. And it's going to save your life sometimes. And yeah, this is one of the most important, actually. Most of you probably, raise your hand if you know what is weak typing of PHP. Yeah, a few people. Well, I have to tell you a story. One of the best practices in PHP is to not use PHP, actually. because I'm joking. No, I'm joking. PHP is very powerful. I love it. But the problem with PHP is that it's very simple to use. But you know that if you have something very simple to use, you have something magic under the hood. And when you have something magic, you do not know exactly how it works. And you can expect strange behavior. So for example, in PHP, we do not have a strict typing. So when we declare a variable, we do not say it is an integer, it is one string, it is whatever. We just have something. Or for example, we could have methods returning a Boolean or one string. That's a problem for PHP. And it will say, oh, this is very convenient because it allows me to write in a very quick way. But I want to show you some very bad example. That is my face when I see this, when I saw this the very first time. So look at the first example. We have 1 plus 1 as string, and the result is 2. Okay, this is one of actually unexpected behavior, because if I use plus for one integer and one string, I would expect something like not a number exception or something like that. But PHP works. Second one, we have one array with 0.1, so it's a string because we have quotes. But if we say echo in array 0.10, not 0.1, in my array, result is true, because we have a kind of integer conversion. And this is going to be very crazy, because we use double equal, you know, the difference between double equal and triple equal in PHP. Second one, the third one is crazy. Third one is very crazy. So we have x that is 0 as number, and we have y, yeah? Is that y? Yeah. And a string. And if we compare, 0 is false, and this is fine, because we all know that 0 is false, whatever is true, usually. If we compare each other, it's true again. This is very strange, because we have a number and one string. It should happen something like type mismatch, actually, not, yeah, okay, it works. And if we compare, for the last time, A is true. So it's going to be crazy, because this is true. They are the same, but this is false. This is not true anymore. Sorry, the first one was false. So it's going to be crazy. But this is not only a problem of type consistency. Yeah, this is my second phase when I saw this again. Because look at this. This is going to be a very big problem in the security. Do you know what is string compare? Because I know that a lot of people do not know this method in PHP. A string compare is a method, actually it was used probably more in C, that compares two strings and returns -1 if one string is lower than the second one, and 0 if they are the same, and 1 if we have the opposite scenario of the first one. So if the password if password is let me in, we should have 0. So what is the problem here? It's very simple. We have an expected behavior of string compare, because if we pass one array instead of one string, we have a strange behavior of string compare, returning null instead of -1, 0, or 1. So look at the previous code. If we inject one array in the first parameter, we have null, and null is 0. So we can get rid of this check. Now we can inject an array. It's quite simple. PHP allows you. So this is going to be very, very dangerous. I found this many, many times. And of course, the right way is to use the triple equal, so the strict comparison. Why I want to underline this? Because I know that a lot of people, and I was one of you actually, because I didn't know about this before preparing this speech actually. And I was using just the non-strict comparison, but now I started thinking that I should, for example, use always a strict comparison, and my methods should always return the same kind of information. So Previously, I was, for example, using methods returning integer on success or Boolean on failure. This is not the right way, actually. So your method should always return the same type. So, for example, using PHP 7.2 is a good option because you have typing in PHP 7.2. So you can say, my method is returning something, and you get an error. And the same you can do for the parameters. So they understood this. And as far as I know, even Magento itself, because I have seen the PHP code of the MSI module, and it's awesome because they are using strict typing. And this is going to be very good. It's going to be very good. Yeah, I want to say that no programmers were injured while running this code, but please do not try at home. I want to even show you some scary numbers because this is true, actually. The information is from 2015, but I think that in 2017 and in a few days, 2018, nothing will change, actually. This is, you have some number of the problem you may find in any PHP application. And Magento is a PHP-based application. I say again, Magento is a very secure platform because they did a very good job. But no platform is bug-free, and you could be the very first one introducing a new security issue. The lesson: you should prefer normalization over filtering. Or better, you should normalize and then filtering. You never have to trust your input. Never. So if you have something coming from the outside, even, for example, a public method in a class should be protected. Because someone could use injecting something from the request object, for example. You should prefer strict comparison, and you should be aware of return types in PHP function. Avoid mixed return types. Don't do that, never. And yeah, hope no one will hack your code, because no software is bug-free, and I think your code will not, as mine. And this is a good resource. This is always, raise your hand if you know about this. It's a kind of, yeah, if I would say in simple words, it's a kind of big database of security issues in which you can find the best practice and some good example. I took some of my examples from here, for example, again. And yeah, last one. We have seen how to avoid introducing bugs, but now we have to understand how we can understand if someone hacked our website, because probably sometimes it's not so easy. I told you before. Yeah, of course, the very first two obvious options are to use Mage Report and Magento Security Scanner. The first one, I think, do you know? Raise your hand if you do, but most of the people do. Anyway, it's a website scanning your Magento from the outside. So it's able to understand if you have a security patch, if someone, for example, injected a malicious script, if you're using unsecure module. But they are going to scan from the outside. The second one is almost the same, but it comes from Magento itself. And it does almost the same, but you can even check for, as far as I know, for JavaScript, for example, in the checkout procedure, so some more appropriate check. But they are going to scan your website from the outside. And sometimes you have one threat inside. So for example, if I have a PHP shell, yes, because if you didn't know, I can create a shell access using PHP. So it's enough to inject one file in your web server to hack your whole infrastructure. You should use something like this. The first one is not exactly a tool. It's a text file from this guy. And because I cannot pronounce his name, I'm sorry. And you run through grep, and you can get a list of files with patterns that are usually common in PHP attacks. Of course, we will have a lot of false positives, but at least it allows you to filter what are the files you should check. Second one, I discovered this a few weeks ago. Actually, no, of course, I didn't know what ClaimAV was, but I didn't know that ClaimAV can scan PHP files. And you can, for example, scan for known malwares. The first one is more generic, of course, and it has false positives. The second one probably will not detect any kind of threat, but you do not have false positives. But, yeah, of course, prevention is the best option, because we have seen the two tools I suggest you to use, and you should use if you think you have been hacked. But you should prevent, of course, because when you are hacked, it's too late sometimes. I want to be the good example. I told you before, contribution is one of the most important parts in Magento. So my company started creating a lot of tools for security. And they are free on GitHub, because believe that if our business is based on Magento, we must give something back. And security probably is one of the most important aspects in our life. We have a set of tools starting from two-factor authentication, reCAPTCHA, and blah, blah, blah. You can download and check them for free. But I want just to show you how this works, because this module is very powerful, and not because I wrote it. No, it's because I wrote it, actually. But don't worry. I want to show you this, because I know if you're not a DevOps, you do not know what is an IPS and an IDS. I can explain to you. IPS is intrusion prevention system, and IDS is intrusion detection systems. Usually, this kind of system is outside Magento, and it should be outside Magento. It should be before Magento, because we have to stop something coming before it reaches Magento. But if you do this, sometimes you have a lot of false positives, because this tool is not aware, for example, of the database structure of Magento, of the modules installed in Magento. This is why we created something inside Magento, but running as plugin of the application. So we get the input at the very beginning of the request. Of course, we cannot stop, for example, problems in PHP or problems in your web server, but we can shield, this is why it's called shield, every attack to broken PHP code of third-party extension or Magento extension or Magento code. And how does it work? Actually, it's very complex. If you want to look at the source code, you can do, but I have just to warn you, it's very bad code. And of course, we get one input, we unpack this input. So for example, if you try to send something base64 encoded, compressed, or whatever encoded, we unpack it in a recursive way. So if you, for example, do a base64 encryption over one serialize, and whatever, we unpack it. We translate in a simplified and encoded form. This is a very complex algorithm, and we pass to a pattern identification. So this is what I told you before. You have to normalize, then you have to analyze. And then, if we found something wrong, we have a score, of course. If we found something wrong, we can apply a lockdown of the website. So that session is blocked. This algorithm is aware of the Magento structure, so you have very few false positives. As far as now, we have no false positive, but I cannot say we will never have false positives. So we can log, for example, what we get and get a message in Telegram, Slack, or whatever, or just apply a lockdown of the website. I have a video. Anyway, this is a form. We try to send a SQL injection attack, and this module stops the session because it's capable of understanding that the input is not fine. Now we're sending the base64 form of the previous SQL injection. And again, we block the session. Now let's go for a XSS attack. This is going to be very simple, actually, to identify. We stop this attack because we recognize you're trying to inject a kind of language. This other example is a bit more complex because it looks like an URL, but we are able again to understand something is wrong. Now let's take a lorem ipsum, and let's see if it will stop a lorem ipsum. I hope it will not. Of course it will not, because it is a quite safe input. Now let's try with something that looks like a SQL query, but it's not. And it is a safe input. This is why we normalize the input, and we are able to understand when you're trying to inject something that is not a regular string, when you're trying to, when we identify, for example, patterns that are common to programming languages and so on. And this is very powerful. I hope you can try it, and you will enjoy it. So I'm done, and yeah, keep calm and I will answer your question, but please do not hack my accounts, because otherwise, you know. So I'm done.